Hello and welcome back. In part 2 of how to write a lab report video, we'll dive deeper into each part of the lab report. First is the results sections. This section contains figures and tables to present your data. Figures can include graphs, images, and diagrams. And each figure must be accompanied by a legend to explain it. A legend contains a title which states the main point of your figure, and other relevant information about your experiment that the readers need to know in order to understand your data. In other words, people should be able to just look at your figure and its legend to understand your experiment and draw a conclusion from it without having to read the text in the results sections. Here are two examples for figures and table in the results section. Below each figure and table is a figure name showing the main point. The example on the left shows the effect of increased temperature on the fungus's ability to capture worms in the form of a bar graph. The table on the right shows the predicted and observed antibiotic sensitivity of a bacterium. Your legend should also include a very brief summary of the experiment to let readers know what's going on in your experiment. You should also note that there are multiple ways you can present the same data. For example, figure on the left can be shown as a bar graph as seen here, or it can also be presented as dot plot with each dot representing one sample. What if your results requires detailed descriptions like in our next example? Let's take a look. In this example, the author tested whether fertilizing plants with urine affects the tomato plant growth. From the picture, you can see that not only the plant height was stunted without fertilizations, the plant without urine looked sickly as well because of the sparse leaves. Giving the readers an image of your result can help them understand your results better, especially when you have a complicated result to describe. If you decide to add images to your results sections, be sure to include a scale when necessary. For this example, I also quantify average plant heights in a bar graph with arrow bars on the right to add objective quantifications to the results. I could also add the number of leaves per plant as another objective quantification too. Whichever way you choose to present your data, be sure to do it in a clear and unbiased manner. Here are a few of my suggestions with some common graph types, but you are more than welcome to look for different graph types that best present your result. For the written portions of the results section, you would want to describe any patterns, trends, relationships you found in your data, and any other qualitative observation as well. After that, include a brief conclusion drawn from each of your experiment. The results section should be written in past tense since you did all of this in the past. Traditionally, some teachers prefer students to write their lab report in third person, which means no I or we. If your teacher or the grading rubric mentions this, make sure to follow it. Otherwise, feel free to use a combination of first and third person narration as long as it makes your writing more accurate, brief, and clear. A combination of first and third person narration is how the majority of science journals are written nowadays anyways. Now let's look at an example of the written part of the results sections and let's try to improve it. The first sentence describes the purpose of the experiment, but it sounds awkward written in passive voice. And it's also quite wordy, so we can work on that. The next few sentences describe the results, but words like the majority of compounds are not precise, and we can make it clearer. This sentence here is also wordy and can be shortened. The last sentence of the paragraph is just a conclusion of this experiment. So let's rewrite this. After the adjustment in blue, the paragraph reads much better and clearer. You can pause here to take a closer look at the changes. Next, we're going to write the materials and methods sections. In this section, you will describe all of the equipment used and how you carry out your experiments. So if someone wants to replicate your experiments in the future, they can. In fact, scientists like us constantly read new publications and try out new methods from other journal articles for our own research. Any standard procedures that people should know, such as how to use a ruler or weigh something on a scale, should be minimal. A sentence like apples should be weighed on a scale to the nearest gram before being dipped in pesticides should be sufficient. If you use any computer software or statistical analysis test to collect or analyze your data, you should include that as well. If your experiment has complicated setup that is hard to describe in writing, you can include a picture or diagram of your setup instead. You should also keep in mind that this section is not a set of instruction, so do not number your methods and do not write instructions such as weigh apples or dip apples in pesticides. This entire section should be written in past tense and third-person point of view, which again, no I or we in the materials and methods. Here are examples of do's and don'ts if you want to pause the video to look at. Coming up next is writing the discussion sections. For this part, you want to summarize your conclusion first, then discuss any potential errors or caveats to your experiment and how it can potentially affect your conclusion. Based on that, you can then state whether your hypothesis is supported or rejected by your data. You can also expand on the results of your project by relating it to other published studies, like discussing whether your results make sense based on what's already known. If your result is surprising given the published data, then you should give a potential explanation as to where the differences came from and explain why your finding is novel or exciting. If you mention any studies, make sure to have in-text citation. I'll go over in-text and reference citation later. This is also the section you can briefly discuss what you want to do next for your project. For example, you found a strain of E. coli that gained resistance to an antibiotic X, which is bad. Then you can propose to look at E. coli from different sources to see whether the resistance to antibiotic X is widespread. Here's an example for discussion sections with annotations for each part I talked about. In terms of grammar, past tense should be used whenever your experiment or other experiments were mentioned. The statement supporting or rejecting your hypothesis can be written in present tense because it is true based on your data. Anything you plan on doing in the future should be written in future tense. Alright, we're almost there. The next major part to write is the introduction. As I alluded to in part 1, the purpose of the introduction is to provide readers with enough background to understand your results and to explain why your study is important or beneficial to advancing public knowledge on the subject. Introduction can be quite long, so I will not give you a specific example, but here are what you should include in your intro. Going from general to specific, give people the background of the issue or the subject you want to study. For example, if your project involves studying antibiotic sensitivity of a bacterium, then for your intro, you can first talk about what antibiotics are, how do they generally work, then dive deeper into how bacteria can gain resistance to the antibiotics and why antibiotic resistance is a problem for human health. Then you can point out what is still not known about the subject at hand and how your study is important for addressing that. Make sure to add in-text citation whenever you cite any knowledge from the literature. And towards the end of your introduction, give an explanation to your central hypothesis and clearly spell out your hypothesis to lead people into the next sections of your lab report when they read it in order. With the introduction done, your report is 90% complete. Let's summarize everything in the abstract. Abstracts are usually quite short, only around 250 words long. Even though an abstract needs to be brief, it is still important that you introduce the issue at hand and its relevance to your project, but make it 1 to 2 sentences only. and the rest of your abstract will be a brief summary of your result and conclusion. My tip for writing this section is to combine main sentences from the introduction, results, and conclusion, then rewrite to make it flow better and shorter. Alrighty, now let's pick a good title for your report. In order for a title to be good, it should be the best description of your project and maximum of 1 sentence. Title can be a complete sentence, but it doesn't have to, and it should not be in the form of a question because you're informing your readers with your lab report, not asking them questions. Here are my examples of do's and don'ts. And finally, the last section you have to write is the reference section. And fortunately, this part is quite simple. If nothing is specified in the rubric, use APA reference style for your lab report. You can take a look closer at the APA format on Purdue University website. The link will be posted in the description box. But now I want to show you an easy way to generate in-text and reference citations using citethis4me.com website. Once you're on the website, choose APA style. Depending on where you're citing from, choose the appropriate source. For this demonstration, I'll cite a journal article. Then enter necessary information to search for your source. Pick the correct entry. Double check if the information on the site is correct. If it's not, you can change it. Then you can copy and paste in-text or bibliography citation to your document. You can also use manually cite button to enter information about authors and sources if your source cannot be found. And that's it, guys. You're done with your lab report. But before submitting, make sure to read through everything again and fix any grammatical errors that you might have. If you'd like to improve your science presentation skill, I'd recommend Betty's video on how to present your scientific results. Link will be in the description box. In the meantime, happy writing!